Is this the dagger?
G'day guys, JB here, coming at you with another review, this time for week 10 of the 2025-26 NBA season. We are really starting to get into the flow of things now following Christmas Day and heading into the new year. We're almost at the halfway point of the season. Give it a couple of weeks, smack bang in the middle of January, and we will be dead on the money there. And there's been some real movements going on. There's been some big upsets and some shaking of some records. There's now been another crucial injury or two that's really impacting things. And of course, as always, trade talks are starting to pick up. So let's get into it. Let's get into my review for week 10 of the 2025-26 NBA season and see exactly where things are standing right now. We start in the East as always with the Atlanta Hawks, and they are on a 7-game skid to the end of week 10, and that does coincide with the return of Trae Young to the lineup. On the week 0-4, they're now 15-19 overall, and they're now 10th in the conference. And they were floating around that 5 or 6 seed pretty consistently there towards the start of December. The best player on the week, Gilgeous-Alexander Walker, in the 4 games that he played, 22.8 points, 2.3 rebounds, 2.8 assists, 1.5 steals, 0.5 blocks on 0.8 turnovers, shot 45.3 from the field, 38.5 from deep, and 80% from the free throw line. And the conversation is now around Trae Young. If you don't trade him now, when do you trade him? And could you realistically let him walk at the end of his contract? The big trade piece that's being talked about right now, Anthony Davis to the Atlanta Hawks. Now, do I like that from Atlanta's standpoint? Absolutely. I think Anthony Davis would fit fine. What I don't like, though, is trading him to Dallas and killing off anything that Cooper Flagg and Kyrie Irving potentially can put together later on in the season. It's going to be a really interesting move no matter what way you look at it from the Atlanta Hawks. The Boston Celtics are 1-1 on the week. They're 19-12, still 7 games above 500. I thought they were going to be a playoff team, but I didn't think they'd be still somewhat a smoky to be a genuine contender in the East. 3rd in the conference, and Jaylen Brown with a really nice week. And at the time of recording, actually on the Celtics all-time consecutive games record for 30 points, tying Larry Bird. 33.5 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals, and 5 turnovers a game. On the week there for Jaylen Brown. 62.8 from the field, 50% from deep, and 75% from the free throw line. There are growing concerns, for the rest of the league at least, that Jason Tatum is going to be back in this lineup. Now, whether that's going to be too quick or too soon, I'm not so sure. But Boston just still managed to present something around. Now, I know everyone talks about how great of a franchise the Oklahoma City Thunder is right now, but Boston have continued to prove time and time again, pretty much since Danny Ainge really took over the team and really started to make those moves to get a championship contender in 2007-8, that they are one of the more preeminent franchises. They find a way to get a good coach, they find a way to have a good front office, and they find a way to get a leading star. Boston, again, doing that this year, albeit in restricted circumstances. To the Brooklyn Nets, 2-1 weekly record, and they are at a perfect 10 below 500. I still think they're out of playoff contention. They are 13th in the East, but I am really liking the work of Michael Porter Jr. this year, to the point where I am absolutely sold on the fact that Michael Porter Jr. should be an all-star in the Eastern Conference. On the week for the 2-1 record, 27.3 points, 8 rebounds, 3.3 assists, 1.7 steals, and 2.7 turnovers, 51.9 from the field, 48.3 from deep, and 75% from the free throw line. The Nets, I think, will progressively get better offensively now that Cam Thomas is back. I don't think they're going to have any major impact. But again, I think the storyline for me this year is that Michael Porter Jr. has changed teams, and I genuinely think that he's an all-star in the Eastern Conference. Over to Charlotte, a 2-1 weekly record, and they themselves also out of contention from the playoffs at 11-21 overall, 12th in the conference. LaMelo Ball was the best player this week, but again, LaMelo is just going to come through. As All-Star voting opens up, he'll capture a few eyes, he'll make some nice plays, he'll have a couple of big stat lines, and everyone will be ranting about why he should be an All-Star, when he shouldn't be, because he's really not contributing much, and really does fall in line with the Zion Williamson level and Ja Morant level of play for what could be. 23.7 points, 3.7 rebounds, 7 assists, 1 steal, and 0.3 blocks on 4.7 turnovers, 41.8 from the field, 43.8 from deep, and 78.6 from the free throw line. Brandon Miller, Colin Knippel, my lord, don't know what I was thinking there. Con Knippel and Miles Bridges are the guys that need to lead this team. They need to build something around that and get some pieces in that can just gel and try and build up a bit more of a reputable franchise, because LaMelo Ball is not that guy. The Chicago Bulls are now sitting more comfortably in the play-in tournament situation there. A 2-2 weekly record, moving to 15-17 overall and 9th now in the Eastern Conference. I want guys that aren't going to turn the ball over, guys that are efficient, and guys that turn up. Nikola Vucevic continues to fill that void there for Chicago. In the 4 games he played this week, 16.8 points, 7.3 rebounds, 2 assists, 0.3 steals, and 0.8 blocks on 1.3 turnovers, 53.7 from the field, 43.8 from deep, and 100% from the free throw line. I know that Chicago have some young guys. I know Chicago have some talent, but they don't display it enough for me to get really excited about them. That's why I've really enjoyed watching Vucevic go about his ball. Always have a consistent double-double machine for most of his career and just continues to be a pillar. But it does say a lot for the Bulls that this is the consistent pillar that they have. To the Cleveland Cavaliers, who are finally sitting on the precipice of falling out of the top 8 in the East. A 2-2 weekly record, 18-16 overall. They essentially can only lose 2 more games if they want to tie their record from last year. That's how far they have fallen in comparison. I don't know exactly what it is. It's been a bad run of injuries, a bad run of form. They are just not as aggressive as they used to be, and I think a lot of it comes down as well to a lot of depleted bench production. That does in turn require health as well. Donovan Mitchell, for me, still standing out with his elite performances this year. 4 games played, was their leading player again this week. 21.8 points, 4 rebounds, 5.8 assists, 2.5 steals, and 0.3 blocks on 2 turnovers. Shot 47.1 from the field, 34.5 from deep, and 84.6 from the line. They need health, they need consistent play, and they need people stepping up. Evan Mobley looked like he was the guy doing that last year. Hasn't this year. Ty Jerome isn't there anymore. Allen and Garland, they've been injured. Guys like Strus not necessarily performing where they'd been before. There are some concerns with Cleveland, there's no doubt about it. To Detroit, they 1-2, or they went 1-2 on the week. They're still number 1 in the East, but the Knicks are closing fast on that there. And the Pistons, they're just not finding form towards Christmas here. I think it'll be a good little point for them heading into January to really revamp, try and hit some momentum towards the All-Star break and build from there if that's what they want to do. They are still number 1 in the East though. 26.3 points, 5.7 rebounds, 13.3 assists. So a really big week production-wise there for Cade Cunningham. 5.3 turnovers, always the concern, and that ultimately becomes the issue from an efficiency standpoint as a leader. 2.3 steals and 0.7 blocks. Shot 51.9 from the field, 44.4 from deep, and 77.3 from the stripe. So still able to be productive. And again, I am really liking Detroit this year. They're certainly one of the 3 leaders. Certainly a clear top 2 participant in the East, but they're clearly a leader and amongst the top 3. Whether their youth and experience becomes an issue as the season progresses, I'm not quite sure. But everything considered, they're playing some still consistent basketball. They just need to avoid some of these hiccups, which we're seeing a lot of decent teams run into right now. The Pacers are officially the worst team in the NBA. It's taken us 10 weeks for them to absolutely get to that point, but they are now the worst record and the worst team in the NBA. Didn't win a game this week, 0-4, 6-27. They are well and truly in the doldrums, but I have to give credit where credit's due to someone like a Pascal Siakam. He did play 4 games there, apologies on the typo. 20.5 points, 6.5 rebounds, 3 assists, 1.5 steals on 2.3 turnovers, 53.3 from the field, 46.2 from the free throw line, unfortunately making less than half from the stripe. He has consistently stepped up all throughout the year, but it shows there's only so much you can do when there's injuries involved. And I mean, for me, it's showing how valuable someone like a Tyrese Halliburton has to be rated within the league now as a point guard with exactly what he does and how he delivers in the clutch. I'm just saying, the narrative certainly has to swing if you're paying any attention. Over to the Miami Heat, who have had a bit of a rebounding week. 3-1 weekly record for them, 18-15 overall. They are back in the top 6 contention of the Eastern Conference, and there are a couple of players that you certainly could have chosen all throughout the week. Norman Powell was certainly one of those guys, but Andrew Wiggins, for me, getting it done on both ends of the floor and just proving to be the gel in a lot of teams that, you know, managed to have a modicum of success. He's consistently a guy that does that no matter whatever squad he is on. 19.8 points, 5.5 rebounds, 3.5 assists, 1.8 steals and 1.3 blocks on 1 turnover. 59.3% from the field, 52.6 from deep, and 83.3 from the free throw line. And again, this comes back to the fact that Miami have a team that have a couple of guys that can step up and be the number one guy, but they're not necessarily the number one guy. So in turn, that just allows for, a lot of flexibility around what they can do as a team, who can impact the game, and who ultimately can be the leader. So for Wiggins, he's playing really, really well, playing both sides of the ball. A guy that on any other team would be getting a lot more credit, but Miami just without that real star right now, and that's just making things a little bit easier for him to fly under the radar. The Milwaukee Bucks, with a consistent week with Giannis back, have managed to string together a couple of wins, a 3-1 weekly record now, still 5 games below 500 at 14-19. They are sitting 11th, and because there hasn't been any movement, you would have to think Giannis has to continue to commit to what he needs to do. And I still have Giannis very much in all-star contention, and to be honest, he would be sitting still inside my top 10 for my MVP, even if with all these games that he's missed, it's purely going to come down now to the fact that they are not in playoff contention. Kevin Porter Jr. with a nice week, though just a little bit inefficient. 15.8 points, 6.3 rebounds, 7.5 assists, 2.8 steals, and 0.5 blocks on 3.3 turnovers. 41.2 from the field, 25% from deep, and 77.3 from the charity stripe. Does make things a little more interesting. The inefficiencies certainly not helping his numbers. But he's having an impact, there's no doubt about that. And he did actually play in all 4 games. Just ignore that 2 games played. He did play in all 4. So Milwaukee, they're fighting to get back to even. If they fight to get back to even and start to get a little more into the playoff picture, you'll start to see Giannis floating around a little bit more in other conversations. Here's the story, though. 3-1 weekly record. They're 23-9 overall. They're second in the East. And are we going to start seeing them win games on the road? That's the big question that's now surrounding the New York Knicks, who have had a massive week. They have one of the leading contenders for the MVP, and he's going to jump into a little more prominence now due to a key injury in the West, and we'll get to that. But Karl-Anthony Towns, for one, has stepped up this week. He's not the player he was last year, and that's certainly going to go to Jalen Brunson, who's had a phenomenal year. But Karl-Anthony Towns stepping up this week and proving what needs to be done if New York are serious about doing any damage once they get out of the Eastern Conference. 24.8 points, 13.5 rebounds, 1.8 assists, 0.8 steals, and 0.5 blocks on 2.3 turnovers. 50.8 from the field, 44.4 from deep, and 87.9 from the free throw line. This is the level of production that he's going to need consistently for the rest of the year if the Knicks are dead serious, because there has been some vulnerability showed there by the Thunder, and they do have the experience compared to the rest of their opposition in the East. Now, I don't think Karl-Anthony Towns is going to be at that level he was last year. Again, thought he was all-NBA level. But if he's going to contribute consistently, he's going to remain in that all-star contention. And if you've got an all-star caliber player next to an MVP caliber player, you're in pretty safe hands as a team. Over the Orlando Magic, 2-2 weekly record, 18-15 overall, 5th in the conference. They're managing this without Wagner in the team, and a guy who has really stepped up and made a case, and a guy who's going to be, for me in discussions around most improved, has to be Anthony Black. 4 games played this week, 27.8 points, 4.8 rebounds, 4.5 assists, 1.8 steals on 0.3 blocks to go with 2.5 turnovers. 48.1 from the field, 51.3 from deep, and 80% from the free throw line. He's had a couple of very good, consistent weeks, and has consistently proven to be a guy that can contribute. Now, he's obviously been fortunate that he's able to step up essentially as a second and third role with Wagner being out, and that's because someone like a Desmond Bain is used to shouldering that second load, and Paolo Banchero certainly can shoulder the lead on this team. It's a performance they're going to need consistently out of him. How consistent they get it, I don't know, but it's certainly something that can play to his advantage. We'll see exactly what Orlando can do. If they continue to manage their record before Wagner returns, maybe they can have a bit more of an impact in the second half of the year. Over to Philadelphia, who still have injury concerns to Joel Embiid, who seem to get some inconsistency out of Paul George, and are relying heavily on the performance of this guy on screen in Tyrese Maxey. Did win a game this week. They're still 16-14, so 2 games above 500 there, and they still sit top 8 in the East, albeit at 7th. Maxey on the week, 22.7 points, 3 rebounds, 5 assists, 2.7 steals, and 0.7 blocks on 3.7 turnovers. Now, the inefficiencies is what clearly proved to be the issue from the field. 39.3 from the floor overall, 30.4 from deep, so he's not striking it as much as he has at the start of the year, and 94.4 from the free throw line. Philadelphia have a lot of old pieces around them. They have some up-and-coming young stars who just need some consistency, but the guys that should be there really helping them out are either injured or close to medically retired. That's what's really hurting. So for Philadelphia, I think you've really got to consider your options around Maxey, around McCain, around Edgecombe. What are you going to do to really help these guys? Because unfortunately, some of these older guys, they're going to have to be sacrificed in a trade or told, hey, we're not renewing your contract, we're letting you go to free agency. Particularly in a circumstance like this week. Stars always going to have an off week at some point, but if you have this big of an off week for a 0-3 in such a tight conference, it becomes a real concern for you to really stay in touch with the rest of the conference. The Toronto Raptors bounced back really nice and have put themselves back in the top 4 of the East with a 3-1 weekly record, now 20-14 overall. This is a team that's deeper than a lot of people gave them credit for, and yes, they had about a 3-week slump there. That was bound to happen. We saw a few different options go through the team at that point. Brandon Ingram really re-establishing himself as an all-star level player, but Scotty Barnes has consistently been the best player on this team this year. He certainly is a leading all-star contender, and a few more wins under their belt during that loss streak. Maybe we're looking at a guy that might be cracking in towards that upper echelon of players on the season. For the week though, in the 4 games that he played, 19.3 points, 12 rebounds, 5.8 assists, 1.3 steals and 0.5 blocks on 2.8 turnovers, 56.1 from the field, 16.7 from deep, 92.3 from the free throw line. It will be Scotty Barnes and Brandon Ingram that continue to lead this team from the front for the rest of the year, and I think it's a relief for Scotty Barnes that someone like a Brandon Ingram can really step up. The only concern is going to be if injuries put both of these guys out, what does this franchise look like? Because I don't know if they maintain a 500 record without them, and if they're not going to maintain a 500 record without them, they may fall on the wayside considering how tight the Eastern Conference is. Finishing up with the second worst team in the East, and this one was an interesting selection for me this week, but he's flying under the radar. He's having a really good defensive year when he's on the floor. He's taken some really nice steps following his rookie season, and that's Alex Sarr as the best player for the Wizards this year, and you'll look at the defensive numbers and understand why. The Wizards did go 2-2, and they are 7-24 overall, 14th in the conference. Sarr himself, 11 points, 6.3 rebounds, 2 assists, 1.3 steals, and 3.8 blocks on 1 turnover, 47.5 from the field, 20% from deep, and 80% from the free throw line. The Wizards aren't going to do anything this year, but if they're able to really recognise and get Alex Sarr out there, maybe a little more recognition for his defensive effort and the development that Washington are bringing these younger guys will give them a bit more of a positive upside heading into next season and beyond. The Dallas Mavericks are back to 10 games below 500. They've got an Anthony Davis injury concern. They've got other injury concerns. They also have an Anthony Davis trade concern, which would impact the play of this guy on screen. The Mavericks are an absolute hot mess. I'm talking 40 degrees in the Australian summer, stuck inside under the air conditioning, hot mess. Cooper Flagg, their best player on the week, despite the 1-3 record. 24.5 points, 6.8 rebounds, 6.8 assists, 1 steal and 0.8 blocks on 3.3 turnovers, 53.3 from the field, 47.4 from deep, 81.8 from the free throw line. I think this guy is a borderline all-star in his rookie year. Con Knipple has been great in what he's doing, and Dylan Harper has been awesome in what he's doing in San Antonio. But for me, it's pretty clear. Cooper Flagg is the rookie of the year, and I would not want to see his progress regress, so to speak, if they were to bring in someone like a Trae Young. Just my opinion, but I don't think it's a good idea. Speaking of not a good idea, and that's the Denver Nuggets going 1-3 in their 4 games in the week just gone. They are 12 above 500, and they are 3rd in the conference. But the man on screen is projected to miss up to 14 to 16 games, i.e. a month, due to a hyperextended knee that he received at the end of this week just gone in the Nuggets' loss to Miami. He was still clearly the best player, and that was capped off after having probably one of, if not the greatest, Christmas Day game of all time. Jokic, for the week, despite the injury and going out early in the contest, averaged a rounded 35, 12, and 12. 35 points, 12.3 rebounds, 12.3 assists, 1.3 steals and 0.5 blocks on 3.8 turnovers, 59.5 from the field, 50% from deep, 92.3 from the free throw line. On a personal note, it's a pretty big detrimental thing because I've got the guy running at worst in the top 2 for my MVP case. At worst, he was the best player in my Supercoach team, and that's now not available to be traded out for a week, so that's going to be a little detrimental. We'll have to replace him. But Denver have 4 out of 5 starters missing. Arguably the best player in basketball is out injured, and if he misses more than 16 games, he's not going to be eligible for potentially a 4th MVP. Now, it's got big enough implications individually for the man, let alone Denver. We'll see how they can maintain themselves essentially to the end of January and reassess the Nuggets from there. The Golden State Warriors, they are clinging on to 8th, and they are clinging on to a 500 record, 2-1 this week, 17-16 overall. As I mentioned, 8th in the conference. And Steph Curry just having some really big games and leading them to wins. To me, he's back in all-star contention. He's had a nice couple of weeks to really get himself back up there as well. 3 games played, 29.7 points, 2.7 rebounds, 4.3 assists, 0.7 steals and 0.3 blocks on 3 turnovers, 41.3 from the field, a third of his shots from deep, 96.3 from the free throw line. Steph is getting old, but shooters will still shoot the basketball. The big conversation coming out of there at the moment is a couple of different trade ideas that have been thrown around for the Warriors, one of them involving Draymond Green, who had a bit of a spat with Steve Kerr on the bench. There's a concern or a genuine question there as to whether they trade him straight up for Anthony Davis. The other random trade that has been thrown around by Bill Simmons, because for a guy who seems to love basketball, he seems to want to kill basketball, he thinks Jimmy Butler and LeBron straight swap would be a good idea. Now, that might actually help the Lakers. I don't think it helps Golden State. And I think that's just a little bit of fantasy land. But Golden State's still holding on. They're 500, or just above, and their best player is currently 37 years old. Speaking of teams that have a 37-year-old as their best player, when you've got the advantage of being 10 games above 500 and having some really, really helpful pieces around them, you can be a little more flexible. And that's the Houston Rockets. 3-1 weekly record, 20-10 overall, 4th in the conference, and Kevin Durant re-establishing himself as one of the preeminent players of this league. And that's not to say he hasn't been, but it's clear that Kevin Durant hasn't been in that pecking order, in that conversation, realistically, for a number of years, probably since he returned to Brooklyn and had that infamous shoe on the line. For Durant this week, 26.8 points, 4.8 rebounds, 5.3 assists, 0.3 steals, 1.3 blocks on 3 turnovers, 60.6 from the field, 45% from deep, 90% from the free throw line. The Rockets, well, they have a bit of an opportunity here, as we are aware now with the Jokic injury, with the poor form of the Lakers. You very well could see Houston shoot back up into that top 3 of the West. Obviously, they're going to have to compete with the Spurs to get into a top 2, and I don't see them catching Oklahoma City. But if Kevin Durant's going to fire along like this, you know, it's a bit of a different conversation, of course. Tari Eason, Jabari Smith Jr., Arlen Thompson, Alfred Şengün, Steven Adams, Reed Shepherd. They're playing really nice basketball around him, which is making his job a lot easier. It's probably the most comfortable he's been on a court since he's been in Golden State, but now's the time to capitalise and try and make the most of what is looking like a finite opportunity as the rest of the league grows. A sentence that I didn't think I'd say for this season, there's going to be several in this one here. They're not in contention, so I'm going to be really brief. The Clippers went undefeated on the week. That's the first sentence. They're 10-21 overall, 11 below 500. They're not going to make an impact on the playoffs or the playoff picture. 13th in the conference. That reads it well. Player of the game, player of the week, Kawhi Leonard, had a 50 piece. He had 50 through 3 quarters. He averaged 41.3 points, 9 rebounds, 4.3 assists, 2.7 steals and 1.3 blocks on 3 turnovers. For the week, he shot 58% from the field, 50% from deep, and 97.1 from the free throw line. Like, OG Kawhi Leonard turned up this week and put on an absolute show and had a career-scoring game. Sentences that I didn't think I would mention in the year 2025, let alone the 25-26 NBA season. The Los Angeles Lakers continue to be on a bit of a struggle streak here over the last 10 games or so. It's going to be interesting to see what they do with different conversations around how they're going to play and whether they need to make any movements. A 1-2 weekly record. They're still 10 games above 500, so they've got plenty to play for. But I think it's becoming more and more evident with their inconsistencies that they're not going to be the contender that everyone thought they may be. 5th in the conference. LeBron, their best player on the week. And, I mean, this is a pretty... It's an efficient stat line, but it's a sad stat line. In comparison to LeBron's career. 21.7 points, 2.3 rebounds, 5.3 assists, 1.3 steals on 0.3 blocks to go with 1.7 turnovers. 62.5 from the field, 50% from deep, and 62.5 from the free throw line. I don't know. The inefficiencies of Luka have cost him points in my MVP race. I think LeBron hasn't necessarily assimilated into the lineup how they thought he was going to. In saying that, that has also taken away from possessions of guys like a LaRavia, guys like a DeAndre Ayton. Austin Reeves has obviously been out. And there's some other guys that really aren't getting as many touches because of LeBron coming back in. The Lakers have to make a hard decision. There's some trade conversations around. Do they accept them? Will LeBron accept them? It's going to be a really interesting point of opinion in the Lakers January in general to see where they're going to be sitting and whether they make any moves. The Memphis Grizzlies continue to try and push towards 500. 2 games below. They're 9th in the conference. They made this run about 4 or 5 weeks ago, and I called for them to do it, and they started making a move. Obviously, they hadn't listened to me. It's just an observation of what they were going to do. And they are still pushing towards a plane, and they're still having concerns around people being in and out of the squad. So it tells me that there's still a chance to do what they need to do. Jaren Jackson Jr., consistently their best player over the last few years, former Defensive Player of the Year, had a really big defensive week as well. 25.3 points, 8 rebounds, 1.3 assists, 1 steal and 4 blocks a game on 3 turnovers, 49.2 from the field, 35.3 from deep, and 70.6 from the free throw line. Again, I just don't know, because Memphis now are at that point where they're struggling to break to 500. So have they absolutely reached their capacity? Is there just a mental blockade? I'm not too sure. Again, a nice week from Jaren Jackson Jr., but he is a low rebounder. He can be an inconsistent scorer, albeit an efficient scorer. They've just got to find someone or something to step up here to get them over that edge and then progress to the next point. The Minnesota Timberwolves just continue to stay thereabouts, and that's probably the best way to describe what they're doing. They're 9 games above 500. They're realistically only a game below the Lakers, but they're a team that has proven at the right time of the year over the last couple of seasons that they can make a run. And they certainly have some pieces around them that suggest they can do it again as well. Anthony Edwards, the best player this week for them, and had a really efficient week. 33.3 points, 4.3 rebounds, 2.8 assists, 2.3 steals on 0.5 blocks to go with 2.5 turnovers, 55.2 from the field, 36.1 from deep, 75% from the free throw line. I'm not expecting Minnesota to do too much more than they already are moving forward, at least until we sort of get towards the end of January there and they know where they sit from an all-star standpoint, and then a few questions can be asked about exactly what they're going to do, exactly where they're going to be, and how they're going to time their run. Conversations allegedly around Giannis for Rudy Gobert. I don't know how that contract holds up, and I don't know that Milwaukee are going to accept that. But that is a team that no one would have thought about making a move that would be instantly the second best team probably in the league if they did make that move, depending on the pieces they get rid of for him. Over to New Orleans, who continue to chase that bottom of the league in terms of seeding standpoint. Obviously, Indiana have it now, and Washington have been a great contributor in that department this year as well. But New Orleans just continue to do it, and this is coming off the back of what was alleged to be an extremely healthy Zion, and this really hasn't proven anything at all. Didn't win a game this week, 8-26 overall, 15th in the conference. Zion Williamson, their best player this week, 25 points, 5.5 rebounds, 2.5 assists, 1.3 steals, and 1 block on 2.8 turnovers. Shot 63.5 from the field, didn't attempt a 3, 79.1 from the free throw line. Let's be honest here. The Pelicans aren't doing anything. They're not going anywhere anywhere. And what has been the worst week for OKC this season still sees them 28-5 on the year. Their chances of actually breaking that all-time record now are tight, i.e. they're going to have to lose just 3 games for the rest of the year. They're going to have to lose just 4 to tie it. But I still think that they are a mile ahead of anyone else in this league, despite what's happened with the Spurs. And I'll tell you a bit of an example I think I have in regards to the Spurs there. You'll kind of get the connotation. Shea, still their best player on the week, epically efficient on the week, 30.3 points, 4.3 rebounds, 5.8 assists, 1.3 steals and 1.5 turnovers, 59% from the field, 23.5 from deep, 86.2 from the free throw line. Bump up the 3-point shot, maybe they're looking like a better team. But it's called matchups, and that's essentially what's causing the issues here for OKC, because when you look around the court, while there's some experience, there's some pretty good similarities to their matchup. The outlier there is Victor Wembanyama in the way that he's able to produce on both ends of the floor to a more elite level than a Chet, and they then don't have anyone that can guard him like that, whereas Wemby certainly has the ability to guard a Chet. So your matchup and your outlier comes in there, that's fine. The way they play their game certainly isn't conducive to matching up with the Spurs. But on the other side of that, how many times have we seen through league history where a team just can't get over the hump in the regular season and they get it done in the postseason? I'm going to back the experience and the championship level of the Thunder before I back the Spurs at this point. I still think that they are sitting head and shoulders above everybody in this league. Over to the Phoenix Suns, and this tells you how tight things are in the West and in general between 2nd and 6th in both conferences. Right now, Phoenix went 4-0 this week, undefeated. They are 6 games above 500 now, really worked themselves into a positive position. They were 15-13 and looking in some real trouble if this week didn't go ahead. They've still had a 4-0 weekly record, but they still sit 7th. So it's a really tough time right now. You've got to really slog away and get on a run if you are going to be competitive in this league at the moment, particularly if you're someone like the Phoenix Suns. Colin Gillespie, one of the most improved players in the league. I'm not only saying that there, I'm seeing other people say that there, and they watch the game as much as I do. 18.5 points, 4.5 rebounds, 7.5 assists, 2 steals and 0.3 blocks on 2 and a bit turnovers, and epic efficient from the field as well. 53.8 overall and 54.5 from deep. So really nice production there from Colin Gillespie, and he's pinch hitting really nicely. He's fitted in really well and taking over what Grayson Allen was doing as a second, third option, but still allowing everyone else to contribute. So they're a really nice contributing team. This is a guy that was struggling to get minutes with Kevin Durant on the side, with Bradley Beal in the side. I don't think anyone would have actually said that Phoenix are going to get rid. Once you acquire Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal, you're then going to get rid of them and get better. That's not a narrative that was around Phoenix, but it's really good to see it happen. Devin Booker still having a really standout season as well. He's going to be in All-NBA contention. And the Suns are just a really nice team right now. The Portland Trail Blazers, currently sitting 5 games below 500. They're in that play-in tournament slot, sitting in 10th. And certainly looked like they were going to be a little bit more than that to start the season, but it looks like the cloud cover has improved, so to speak, on their prospects there. 2-2 weekly record, but Deni Avdija, to me, has to be an absolute lock for playoff contention, for all-star contention. I think if he was on a better team, he'd certainly be a lock for playoff contention. There's no doubt about that, but certainly all-star contention. And a big week for him, 26.3 points, 7.8 rebounds, 9.5 assists, 1.5 steals and 0.5 blocks on 5.5 turnovers, 48.1 from the field, 27.6 from deep and 67.6 from the free throw line. I mean, Avdija has just had a massive season this year. He started to break out a little bit last year. He'd shown signs of it prior in Washington, but hasn't really had that chance to really get the ball in his hands. But Thiago Splitter has really trusted Avdija to be next to Drew Holiday and really contributing. Someone like a Shaedon Sharp benefiting from it as well. So we'll see exactly where this continues to lead out for Avdija and the Blazers. But for me, he certainly has to be a lock to be an all-star in 25-26. The Sacramento Kings, 1-2 weekly record, 8-24 overall, 14th in the conference. They continue to be a high-octane offensive team. They tend to be typically inefficient, and they tend to be lacking defensively, and that's why they're in the current position that they're in right now. DeMar DeRozan, their best player this week in the 3 games played, 22.7 points, 3.7 rebounds, 6 assists, 1 steal, 0.3 blocks on 1.3 turnovers, 51.1 from the field, 14.3 from deep, 91.3 from the free throw line. Yeah, the Kings aren't going anywhere fast. They've got a lot of old pieces, or pieces that want to move, or that have proven to be problems when they didn't move. And the best player is a guy that they signed right at the last minute who couldn't get a contract. And is proving why he should have got a contract, but has consistently proven to be their number 1 guy. It's just not really good for management, who apparently are on the look for a point guard. I heard De'Aaron Fox and Tyrese Halliburton aren't too bad. It's a shame they couldn't keep a hold of them. 2 more teams to go here in the West. Of course, we'll move over to the 2nd seed, San Antonio Spurs, 2-2 on the week, 23-9 overall. Victor Wembanyama is transitioning from a non-starting role and being a general reserve at the moment, the 6-man option, to getting back into that starting lineup, and is having some impacts on games. The only concern for Wemby at the moment is keeping up appearances as far as the MVP is concerned, and certainly as far as the Defensive Player of the Year is concerned. 22.3 points, 9.3 rebounds, 2.8 assists, 0.5 steals and 1.8 blocks on 2.8 turnovers. Shot 51.7% from the field, 35.7 from deep and 88.9 from the free throw line. The Spurs with a couple of decent wins there against Oklahoma City. They then have some issues against Cleveland and the Jazz. But for San Antonio, they're just showing that they're peaking really nicely. They probably are peaking a little bit early, but because they've got the youth on their side, they've got some genuine talent, and they've got some high echelon all-time ability. Peaking early isn't necessarily a bad thing for them. Maybe they're taking the steps earlier than someone like Oklahoma City certainly took, but they have the pieces around them to be that level of team. Staying healthy, staying fit, staying on the court is going to be crucial, and waiting out the storm that is the Oklahoma City Thunder over the next couple of seasons will ultimately determine whether they are a genuine championship contender. If they can take advantage of the lack of their opposition right now, as far as some injuries and some chemistry issues are concerned, then I think they'll be fine. There's nothing to read into those 2 losses. The Spurs are a genuine what-if team, particularly for the rest of this season. Finally, we move over to the Utah Jazz, 7 games below 500, so they're a couple of games off Portland as far as being in that play-in tournament, but they, again, continue to show some chutzpah and certainly show some ability on the floor at the moment, and can really prove to be, if you're not on your game when Utah are on their game, it's a tough matchup for you there. 2-1 weekly record, 12-19, as I mentioned, 11th overall in the conference, and Keontae George still operating as one of the best open floor players in the league. In his 3 games this week, 27.7 points, 4.7 rebounds, 6 assists, 1.7 steals, and 0.7 blocks on 2.3 turnovers, 48.1 from the field, 44.4 from deep, and 87.5 from the free throw line. It is a matter of seeing exactly whether Utah do anything with this guy, and it seems to be a really repeat thing. Utah have a couple of good weeks. Hey, maybe they're better than we thought. Utah have a couple of bad weeks. Okay, they're back where we thought they'd be. It then comes down to the contributions of a Markkanen and a Keontae George. That's how it's going to be until a significant move is made for either, or an increase in bodies on the team, essentially, for Utah, makes them a more credible franchise. I don't know how they're going to do it. Are they working as a farming system, as you sort of saw Orlando and Houston doing for a couple of years? I don't know. But Utah, they're just sort of in limbo. It's not necessarily great to be in limbo with the way that the league works in 25-26. That has been my review, guys. That is week 10 in the books for the 25-26 NBA season. As you can see, some key victories shaking up some of the standings there. Some good performances really bringing some guys into prominence. An injury concern or two really going to throw a spanner in the works for the MVP race and subsequent other awards that are around the league. And, of course, you then have to worry about all the trade rumours and concerns that are floating around generally for big players going to big teams, because, why would we want to continue this parity and get everyone up to balance and making this a real what-if league, which is what I think has actually made the NBA exciting over the last couple of seasons. Anyway, guys, that's been me. Thank you for tuning in. I hope everyone has had a safe Christmas and everyone has a safe New Year. That has been me. I'm out.